Hi, I'm Dr. Lori Baudino, and we are here this morning to do a collaborative check-in. Every week, I'm meeting with different experts to provide support to families and children during this time. And today, I'm so excited and blessed to have Dr. K with me with Wholistic Kids. And Dr. K, will you tell us about Wholistic Kids and about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Really, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a board certified pediatrician. I've been practicing since 2006. Over the last decade plus, I've just been really heavily focused on integrative medicine. So I kind of got into it probably before it became really mainstream.
Yeah.
And I've done 2 different fellowships in integrative medicine, and it's really my passion. It's how I live. It's how I take care of my family, just personally, and then also, the care I provide through the practice that I have, which is called Wholistic Kids. And really, the way I look at things is you can never have too many tools, right?
Right.
I look at allopathic conventional medicine as a fantastic set of tools, but it's only a limited set of tools. And what I tell our families is, with the way I practice, it's like hiring a contractor that shows up with 5 tools and then another guy that shows up with 50 tools. The more tools you have, the more precise you can be and the more effective you can be in treating things. And I think that's the big difference. When conventional docs say, well, your kid is coughing, I'm just going to give you an antibiotic just in case. For me, it's like your kid is coughing, it doesn't look bacterial. Here's an herb or a essential oil or a homeopathic. And it's really just a matter of finding the best match for that situation. And I think the other side of this is just the ability to understand scenarios. So, in allopathic medicine, and I saw this when I was in my training back in, 03 to 06, that it's fantastic. When a kid is about to die or when certain things are about to happen, allopathic medicine is great, and it provides very clear understanding of certain scenarios. It doesn't provide a very clear understanding of other scenarios. A perfect example is I work with a lot of kids who have intense sensory issues and weird anxiety patterns, and 6-year-olds that are showing depressed, where no one can make sense of that.
Right.
And through the allopathic lens, other than saying, well, your kid has an anxiety disorder, and it's just like, how does it make sense for a 6-year-old to have an anxiety disorder, right? Through these other lenses, we can look and say, oh, this kid has a sensory issue. Oh, wow, look, there's a bunch of candida growing in their gut, which shouldn't be there. And as we address these things, it starts changing the system. So it's not about being holistic in terms of, the granola, like I only eat, whatever. It's really about how do you look at the child in one complete holistic fashion to understand how all the pieces come together to cause a child to be healthy or not.
Right, right. Well, you are speaking my language and touching my heart, because two parts that I'm thinking about is just when I, as a psychologist, and I focus on the whole body, a mind-body approach through dance movement therapy. And one of the things I often say is that we're not trying to change the child and make them someone different, but we are trying to kind of flex the container or build up their resources, build that toolkit. And so when I look at the child too, I'm looking at what are we talking about? We can't just look at a behavior and say your child's aggressive, mean, lazy, difficult, all the adjectives that we sometimes feel, or parents might be thinking about. But what's going on in the gut, what's going on in their mental health, their environment, their sensory system, their movement profile, their ears, their eyes, their breathing, right? So there's so many layers, and this is just so refreshing to know that as a pediatrician, because I do say that pediatricians are kind of our end-all be-all. Parents, they get to see you from the second the baby comes out and all through the child's development, hopefully. And to hear that there's a pediatrician that also is saying, hey, there's this important medicine and there's also these other tools that we're going to look at. And I really value that, because you're not saying one is better than the other. You're just saying, hey, let's all, combine them together, which is why we're talking today, is because I want parents to know this is, what we want to provide our children.
Yeah.
So this is really exciting. Is there a specific consensus that's going on during this pandemic that you're experiencing with families?
Well, I mean, I think it goes without saying that families as a whole are under a lot of pressure.
Definitely.
And there are a lot of kids who are having, various kinds of behavioral issues, some having mild anxiety patterns. And this is the normal, healthy population.
Right.
I think in the other population of the sensory kids, the kids with anxiety, I mean, those children are having an even greater time. Conversely, it's also interesting to see some of those kids are actually flourishing because they're no longer in the stressful school environment. So they're at home, everything is calm, everything is
familiar.
controlled. So I've seen both where some parents are like, oh my God, this is the best like they've ever done in the last 4 years. And it's because there's nothing to stress them. And then there are other kids that are actually having more anxiety. So I guess it's going both ways.
Yeah, I think it's so important that we have an opportunity to kind of really sit in and drop into what is the difference of each of our children and what do they need. And sometimes when they're in the busy schedules, we don't always see those dynamics. So some of what you're talking about I'm even hearing from my families I work with, we're doing really well right now. Or the child, there's, some settling happening. Or now that things are starting to reopen and there's new dynamics of this parenting decision of, are we going to go out? Are we not going to go out? There is some adjustment and expanding on what we've been doing. We have to keep evolving with our child.
Yeah. The other thing that's been interesting is as I'm talking to our families, some of them are starting to notice issues that they weren't aware of because the kid was in school, they had interaction, but nothing like they are now. So I'm actually getting a new wave of subtle challenges where, oh my God, I didn't know my kid struggled so hard to read, or, oh my God, when we're doing whatever. So it's actually bringing up some factors. And, for me, I try to drill down into every issue because part of my job, I see it is not just addressing where the child is now, but also looking at 5 years down the road. Yes. And, I like in some of the 4-year-olds, we're talking about, well, what can we do to make sure they don't end up with ADHD? Because in working with enough of those kids that are labeled ADHD, there's a pattern that almost shows up beforehand. And when they're 3, there's certain scenarios that are things that happen, and then at 5. So a lot of what we're doing is actually now engaging in preventative discussions, not that there's anything broken in the child, but as we address certain challenges that they have, hopefully that'll put them into a better place when they're older.
Absolutely. I use this analogy of a pool because sometimes we're thinking like, what caused what and what do I focus on and what do I attack and take care of? And instead I think of it as there's these different water droplets, different variables that have fed into creating this child. We can't sift the water out because we can't say it was this, it was this, right? But there are many factors, and now they're in this pool and we get to teach them how to swim versus sink. Mm-hmm. So now that they're in there, we can support them. It's like we can do some of that preventative. And when you're talking about ADHD or the sensory kids, there are so many ways in the body even that I see these patterns, these different qualities in the body, and that when we can get them in this fluidity or this flow, in this organized way, the child has some more resources. Is there from a health perspective in terms of supplements or dietary, are there some key elements that parents should be thinking about in terms of what to give their children during this time or maybe always?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think now more than ever, having a low inflammatory diet is probably most important. So when you look at the data, and this is for adults too, when you look at the data, especially with this coronavirus, what it does is it just triggers a massive inflammatory response in the system. Mm-hmm. So I think rare reports that we're getting of, this multi-systemic inflammatory condition in the kids that's raising some flags, that's an inflammatory response. Mm-hmm. When you look at the poor adults who have ended up on ventilators and ultimately passed, it's an inflammatory response. So everything boils down to having an immune system that is not able to regulate itself. Mm-hmm. And when this coronavirus comes, and I've shared with our families that I equate the coronavirus to an arsonist. If an arsonist went and threw a bunch of matches on a concrete, parking lot, nothing would happen, right? They can throw a Molotov cocktail, nothing would happen. A little fire, and then it would die. Right. If they throw that same match or whatever in a overgrown forest with tons and tons of dry tinder, all of a sudden you've got this horrific fire that just wreaks havoc. some kids and adults have the same thing as a dry forest with lots of tinder, and this coronavirus comes and boom, it just sets off this massive inflammatory response. And fortunately, a lot of that can be controlled through diet.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing down gluten, not eating so much dairy, bringing sugar down. Sugar is probably one of the most pro-inflammatory foods. And sugar also happens to be the thing that causes a lot of kids to just go berserk, right? You give kids a lot of sugar, what happens? They just go crazy because there's all of this sugar to drive, excess energy. It's so funny, but simple things like just eating a lot of vegetables, I sound like my grandmother, like eat your vegetables,
Right.
but by doing these very, very simple things, we can actually down-regulate the inflammatory response. And what people aren't talking about is the gut.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've paid much attention to the reports with, this systemic disease in kids. What they report prior to the vast majority of these kids developing some kind of complication is they had pretty severe digestive challenges, and then all of a sudden they fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And that all talks about the fact that the gut, and in some kids, the gut is not in a very good state of health, that the gut gets hit, weird things happen within the gut. Next thing you know, the immune system is going bonkers, and then the kid or adult end up in trouble.
Which I see consistently, even from a psychological, emotional state, that if the vagal nerve and the gut is being affected, you hear kids complaining of tummy aches, or even with challenges with their sight and the intensity of what they're working on, they complain about their guts. That butterfly feeling in your stomach, or that uncomfortable feeling, tapping into that, how connected we are and how important the gut is. And that we don't always talk about it, but I'm so glad you are, and that there are some things we can do about it. That sounds like we can do. Are there specific supplements? I always love hearing about supplements, and I'm a big probiotic believer in taking probiotics, but there are so many kinds out there. And so I say, talk to your pediatrician, look at different options. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So probiotics are super, super helpful. And, the way a family can know if they're getting a good probiotic or not is if there's multiple strains. So at least there's, 5, 7 strains. And the probiotic for, let's say, a 4-year-old on up, at least has 5 billion colonies. Mm-hmm. There are some better ones out there, like Garden of Life. If someone goes to Whole Foods, actually has a pretty good one. There are several more, how would I put it, pharmaceutical grade ones. And there's a website called pureformulas.com, and I have no association with any of these companies, that actually sells some of the more medical grade probiotics to the public. So that's a way to do it. What we don't talk a lot about are prebiotics. So I've actually become a bigger fan of prebiotics because over time, I've actually found them to work even better than probiotics. We use them in conjunction, and prebiotics are basically fertilizer that help the good bacteria grow. Okay. So by feeding, and if you eat a very high vegetable, high fiber diet, you're already getting prebiotics. Okay. So onions, garlic, the entire allium family, broccoli, all of bok choy, all of these actually have prebiotics that feed the good bacteria. Mm-hmm. Now, not all kids or adults are necessarily the best vegetable eaters, right? And that's where actually the prebiotics in a supplement form can come in. A really simple prebiotic that is dirt cheap is actually inulin, INULIN, and you can find that anywhere. Okay. And then there are fancier ones that you can get. Like there's a product that I really love. It's called Biotagen, BIOTAGEN, which is also pretty readily available on the internet. And if you're the adult or you got the kid, you already know the diet is not fantastic. You can actually fill in that gap with one of these prebiotics. And while it's not exactly the same as eating, a high fiber diet, it still makes things work. Another thing that I'm a big fan of is turmeric. Whether you get it in a fancy curcumin form or you just sprinkle turmeric on everything, it's literally, as they say, the spice of gold. It's incredible in terms of what it does. Yeah,
and incredible during these times. I've had some nutrition workshops of just how to get kids motivated to eat, and how you can just take a seasoning like turmeric and change the whole meal just by putting on a different seasoning, right? Different taste. I value finding fun and creative ways to get kids motivated about eating, having them be a part of that cooking, having them be, different ways, shapes of food. So there's always options out there.
Yes.
Also doing things for activating the vagal nerve. So humming and moving and, activating our body with different cold temperatures in the shower, or doing different breathing exercises, running, activating that part of our body and being connected to it.
Yeah. Just deep breaths, right? The breath work itself, just by bringing the diaphragm down, that actually activates the vagus nerve. And, one of the things that's really cool, I'm so grateful that you're bringing this up and you share this with your families. It turns out that when we activate the vagus nerve and we drop down into that deep, calm state, that actually has benefits to the gut itself. So the sympathetic, the kind of fight-flight nervous system actually disturbs the gut. It changes the bacteria. It activates candida to become more aggressive. It actually causes leaky gut if it is there long enough. So if you ever care, there are all of these studies out there where they took these poor mice and stressed them out. And let's not talk about how they did that, but they stressed these mice out, and then they went and looked at the guts of these mice later, and within 2 to 3 hours, the mice had developed the leaky gut from the stress that they had endured. Right. So there's a lot to be said about bringing one down into a nice calm state and maintaining that state. And one of the things that I've really been focusing on in the midst of this pandemic is just helping our families maintain a state of calm.
Yes.
Because there's so much fear out there. There's so much fear out there, whether you're listening to the government or you're watching the news, it's just fear, fear, fear. You're going to die. Your kid is going to die, blah, blah, blah. And this pandemic is serious. I'm not saying it's not, but the fear that is being pushed into the population, one, I think is completely irresponsible. And two, I think at the end of the day is actually causing a lot of harm.
Absolutely.
So part of what I've been trying to do is just, have families, be responsible, be aware, be concerned. I'm not saying don't be any of those things, but don't be fearful. That actually can cause you harm and weaken your immune system. So you're actually less able to handle this virus if you were to get exposed to it.
Right. Absolutely. It's so much about staying in the here and now of what is. So, and there's this feeling, it's been unfortunate in so many ways, but eye-opening of how, when a family's doing well, or when ourselves are doing well, like just in reality, we are healthy. We're sitting here right now. We're in this space. That should be able to be expressed and celebrated. And that can be true while also, as you're mentioning, this is a serious pandemic and there are a lot of loss and complications going on in the world. They don't have to extinguish one another. No. They both exist. No. And I think that's hard sometimes for the culture. It's easier to say, oh, I'm feeling really bad. I need, this is wrong and this is wrong. But when we could just step into, your child is in front of you and you're home right now, and we can, be in this moment and calm down and slow down. It's such a gift. And what we were talking about is it's a gift in twofold, right? It's a gift to your gut, it's a gift to your family and to your overall health. So it's so wonderful.
Yeah. And thank you for touching on that, because I really wish the media would talk about all the great things that are happening. I wish they would talk about the millions of people who have gotten this and didn't even develop a blip of an issue. I wish we would talk about how resilient, 99% of the 99.9% of the population is against this virus. We don't talk about that at all. We don't talk about how so many people have incredible systems that can handle the worst stressor in the world and just walk through it like it's nothing. And we focus on the awfulness that happens.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
well, and I this is why I'm so excited to talk to you as well, is just that I haven't heard, and I know that there's so many resources out there if you search the web, but really talking about how we can care for ourselves, not only from medicine, but also through relaxation, through being present, through prebiotics and probiotics and healthy eating. And then you have, like you mentioned at the beginning, you have a bigger toolkit. And that's, going to come in handy when you're trying to build this house, this body of ours, more than thinking of the few tools that we're missing. So that's wonderful. So I could keep talking to you so much, but I will allow you to get back to your work as well. Can you share with us, how do we get in touch with you? How do we find you?
So if families search for Wholistic Kids with a W, so WHOLISTIC Kids, that's the name of our practice. I'm actually launching another site, which is Wholistic Minds, so MINDS, also with a W. And that site is actually really focused on helping families whose children are suffering from, severe anxiety, weird behavioral challenges, and just getting information out there in terms of why these things happen and what families can do about it. And our physical practice is in Santa Monica, and if they do a search for the Wholistic Kids, our phone number and everything comes up so they can contact us as they need.
Great. Well, I want to be involved in all the things you're doing and be a resource for you as well. This has been so wonderful. I can't thank you enough, and all these families can't thank you enough. I always hear good things about Dr. K, and as I mentioned, I was talking about you last evening about when we're looking at a child and there's challenges going on, I start to kind of go through the list and I say, what's going on with the eating? What's going on with the body? What about their overall health from the time they were born till now, even when they were in utero, what was going on? And then I start to say, okay, let's collaborate with Dr. K. so thank you again. And
my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for the work you do. And thank you for bringing this consciousness to the community and really pushing forward this really incredible way of caring for your families and clients. It's really invaluable.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Be well.